ability to have somebody who is kind of epitomizes what you think your country stands for.
Behind the grand ceremonial gates of Buckingham Palace, a quiet standard of absolute duty is enforced far away from public view. For decades, the public believed Queen Camilla held complete and unshakable authority alongside King Charles. But when a long-hidden secret was brought into the light by Andrew Parker Bowles, it triggered an explosive institutional crisis. Armed with indisputable proof of an unauthorized legal maneuver, Princess Anne launched a swift and uncompromising administrative strike to strip Camilla of her final royal title. What began as a covert bid for lifelong power ended in total neutralization, proving that no individual is larger than the crown itself. The cracks in the facade. Behind the gilded gates of Buckingham Palace, the illusion of uninterrupted regal stability is maintained with exquisite precision. To the public eye, the modern British monarchy presents a unified front, defined by grand ceremonial processions, meticulous public appearances, and an unwavering commitment to continuity. Yet, behind the polished oak doors of St. James Palace, an entirely different narrative was beginning to take shape. The absolute harmony long projected to the world was starting to fracture under the weight of quiet institutional friction, giving way to an unprecedented power struggle that threatened to undo decades of carefully crafted public relations. The initial signs of this internal rupture did not emerge from public scandals or dramatic press leaks. Instead, they manifested in the cold, unyielding world of internal palace administration. Following the accession of King Charles, the royal household initiated a massive structural audit aimed at modernizing estate operations, auditing crown properties, and streamlining the long list of royal patronages. It was a routine administrative exercise on the surface, designed to ensure that the transition into a new reign remained smooth and cost-effective. However, as independent legal advisors and senior estate stewards began sifting through decades of archived documentation, they encountered subtle anomalies that disrupted the standard flow of administrative authority. Quiet whisperings began to circulate within the inner sanctum of the senior royal staff. Reports surfaced regarding unusual requests for administrative autonomy originating from Queen Camilla's private office. Certain legal frameworks and operational budgets appeared to be functioning outside the direct oversight of the sovereign grant. For months, these irregularities were treated as minor administrative oversights, the natural byproduct of a newly established court adjusting to its vast responsibilities. But as the audits deepened, it became glaringly evident that these were not casual errors. A parallel infrastructure was quietly operating within the palace walls, sustained by legal instruments that lacked clear, historical precedent. At the center of this growing storm was Princess Anne, the Princess Royal. Renowned for her terrifying work ethic, fierce loyalty to her late mother's legacy, and absolute intolerance for organizational clutter, Anne had long served as the ultimate guardian of traditional royal protocol. She viewed the monarchy not as a family business or a platform for personal prestige, but as an ancient, uncompromising trust held on behalf of the nation. When early summaries of the financial and administrative audits reached her desk at Gatcombe Park, her instinct was immediately on high alert. Where others saw minor legal ambiguities, Princess Anne recognized the early stages of an unauthorized power consolidation. The subtle shift in atmosphere became impossible to ignore for those working closely within the household. Meetings between senior royals grew noticeably brief and strictly formal. The relaxed warmth that usually characterized private family gatherings was replaced by a tense, vigilant silence. Princess Anne began attending key administrative committee meetings in person, asking direct, unvarnished questions about specific land deeds, honorary titles, and private trust structures that had been quietly updated in the final years of Queen Elizabeth's reign. Her presence alone signaled to the palace bureaucracy that the standard, comfortable routines were over. It soon became apparent that a specific, highly controversial document was at the heart of the friction. Rumors swept through the corridors of St. James Palace that an unratified administrative instrument existed, one designed to grant Queen Camilla an unprecedented permanent title, along with an independent office completely exempt from future sovereign review. To Princess Anne, the mere existence of such a document represented an existential breach of protocol. The royal family bloodline and its strict hierarchy were non-negotiable pillars of the Constitution. Any attempt to construct a secondary, permanent base of authority for a consort, particularly one that would endure beyond the current reign, was a direct challenge to the future of the crown. While Queen Camilla's team worked diligently to present the arrangement as a standard protective measure for a queen consort, the atmosphere inside the palace continued to deteriorate. Senior courtiers found themselves forced to choose sides, caught between loyalty to the reigning king and deference to the princess royal, unyielding defense of institutional tradition. The tension reached a critical point as the true nature of the unratified document remained shrouded in legal ambiguity. The strategic maneuvering was no longer confined to quiet conversations in palace hallways. It had evolved into a high-stakes standoff over the core principles of sovereign authority. The cracks in the facade were widening rapidly. What the public perceived as a seamless transition into a modernized monarchy was, in reality, a delicate system on the verge of internal confrontation. Princess Anne remained resolute, determined to uncover every detail of the legal maneuvering before any permanent damage could be inflicted upon the institution. She knew that, in order to protect the integrity of the sovereign line, she would need more than suspicion and administrative intuition. She needed undeniable proof, a definitive revelation that would expose the true origins and purpose of the hidden instrument. The quiet fracture within the House of Windsor was about to become an outright institutional war, and the resolution would depend entirely on secrets that had remained buried for over 50 years. The hidden secret revealed. Every institutional conflict has a turning point, a single moment where shadowy suspicions solidify into unassailable facts. For Princess Anne, that moment arrived not through an official intelligence briefing or a court audit, but through an extraordinary disclosure from a man who had walked the inner sanctums of British high society for over half a century. Andrew Parker Bowles, former Army officer, trusted confidant to senior royals, and former husband to Queen Camilla, held a unique and quietly dangerous position. He had observed 5 decades of royal history from behind the curtain, understanding better than anyone how private family arrangements were often transformed into official palace policy. The relationship between Princess Anne and Andrew Parker Bowles was built on decades of mutual respect, shared social circles, and absolute discretion. Having dated briefly in their youth before remaining lifelong friends, their rapport was defined by a candid honesty that bypassed standard palace formalities. When news of the administrative audits and the suspicious paperwork circulating within St. James Palace reached Andrew, he recognized the warning signs immediately. He knew that certain historic legal arrangements, drafted during periods of intense emotional transition within the family, carried long-term institutional consequences that could no longer remain buried. A private meeting was arranged far away from the prying eyes of London media and the listening walls of Buckingham Palace. Deep within the quiet seclusion of the English countryside, Andrew handed over a private portfolio of archived records to the Princess Royal. The contents of that dossier contained the definitive key to resolving the mounting crisis inside the household. It detailed an unratified legal instrument, quietly drafted over 15 years prior, that sought to establish a hidden secondary title for Queen Camilla, complete with independent authority, direct control over specific historic trusts, and total immunity from future monarchical oversight. The origin of the document traced back to the delicate years surrounding the transition of public perceptions. In the era preceding the modern reign, senior advisors within Camilla's private team had sought long-term guarantees. They feared what might happen to her status, financial independence, and formal title in the event of major political shifts or future successions. To insulate her office from potential future exile, a select legal team drafted an administrative charter. This hidden clause proposed bestowing upon her an ancient secondary crown appointment, an honorary lifetime title that would grant her administrative veto power over core royal holdings and guarantee her private office permanent funding completely outside the sovereign grant. What made the secret document so explosive was not merely its existence, but the covert manner in which it had been handled. According to the internal communications included in Andrew's dossier, the instrument had been signed in draft form under the assumption that it would eventually receive final formal approval from the ruling monarch. However, that sovereign consent was never officially granted, nor was the document ever presented to parliamentary constitutional advisors for statutory approval. It remained an unratified shadow mandate, tucked away in private legal archives, yet quietly relied upon by Camilla's office to claim authority over specific military honors and traditional estate patronages. For Princess Anne, reading through the private correspondence and legal codicils brought immediate, crystal-clear clarity. The mystery of the recent administrative pushback was solved. Queen Camilla's team was relying on an invalid, unratified document to secure an unprecedented layer of permanent power, attempting to lock in a lifetime royal title that had no legal foundation under constitutional law. The secret was out, and the motivation behind the parallel infrastructure was fully exposed. It was a covert attempt to establish a permanent enclave of authority that even a future king could not easily dismantle. Andrew disclosure provided Princess Anne with the ultimate lever of authority. The unratified document was a direct violation of traditional royal governance, which strictly mandates that every official title, honor, and financial mechanism must be explicitly authorized by the sovereign and recorded in formal letters patent. To attempt to execute powers based on an incomplete, hidden mandate was an unpardonable breach of institutional integrity. As the meeting concluded, the shift in momentum was absolute. Armed with documented proof, private correspondence, and the historical context provided by Andrew, Princess Anne possessed the exact evidence required to confront the situation head-on. The hidden secret that was meant to protect Queen Camilla's secondary power base had instead become the very instrument that would guarantee its complete collapse. Princess Anne returned to her executive office determined to execute a decisive constitutional strike, ensuring that the unratified title was dismantled and erased from the record once and for all. The bloodline principle. The British monarchy has survived for over 1,000 years, not through sentimentality or public popularity, but through an absolute, unyielding adherence to constitutional law and the sacred principle of bloodline succession. Titles, styles, and royal elevated positions are not personal decorations to be handed out like corporate perks. They are public trusts governed by ancient statutes, strict letters patent, and parliamentarians' oversight. For Princess Anne, the fundamental rule of royal life was simple. Authority stems directly from the bloodline, and no spouse, consort, or secondary figure may ever rewrite the core rules of monarchical governance. Her entire life stood as a living masterclass in this uncompromising philosophy. As the second child and only daughter of Queen Elizabeth II, Anne had been born directly into the sovereign line. She had spent 7 decades performing heavy public duties with quiet efficiency, never seeking to expand her personal empire or alter her official standing. To her, the crown was an eternal institution to which individuals were temporarily bound in service, never a vehicle for individual self-aggrandizement. When the full reality of the unratified document was laid bare before her, it did not merely represent an administrative error. It was a profound direct assault on the bloodline principle itself. The idea that Queen Camilla's private court had engineered a hidden mandate to grant her an unprecedented permanent title was, in Anne's view, complete institutional treason. It sought to place a non-blood member of the royal family into a position of administrative immunity, carving out a permanent enclave of authority that could undermine future reigns. The constitutional implications were massive. If a queen consort could quietly secure an unratified secondary title through private advisors and shadow agreements, the integrity of the sovereign hierarchy would be permanently broken. It would set a terrifying precedent where incoming consorts could demand independent financial estates, unmonitored patronages, and perpetual political shielding outside the control of the reigning king and his rightful heirs. Princess Anne's response was guided by absolute clarity. There would be no internal backroom negotiations, no quiet compromises, and no legal modernizations designed to save face for the individuals involved. The institution required total, uncompromising enforcement of its own rules. Her first mandate was the immediate protection of the future line of succession. Prince William, as the Prince of Wales and direct heir to the throne, represented the absolute future of the sovereign line. Any legal framework that sought to strip authority from his future reign, or force his administration to fund an independent shadow office established during his father's time, was an intolerable breach of duty. Anne recognized that her role was to clear the path for the next generation, absorbing the internal political conflict so that the future king would not be trapped by inherited legal entanglements. In a series of high-level private discussions with senior house officers and executive estate legal advisors, Princess Anne articulated her stance with devastating force. She made it clear that the royal family's stability depended entirely on total transparency and strict structural boundaries. A consort exists to support the reigning monarch, not to establish a parallel court of lasting influence. The hidden title, missing the mandatory letters patent signed by the sovereign and formally recorded under the Great Seal of the realm, was completely null and void. Her uncompromising stand sent shockwaves through the highest offices of the royal bureaucracy. Senior legal counsels who had previously tiptoed around the delicate family dynamics quickly realized that the Princess Royal was not operating on personal grievances. She was executing a cold legal defense of the Constitution itself. She demanded a full audit of every patronage, honorary title, and legal codicil attached to Queen Camilla office, insisting that every single grant lacking proper constitutional backing be identified and prepared for immediate cancellation. The bloodline principle was non-negotiable. Princess Anne remained an unyielding wall against institutional drift, reminding everyone within the palace hierarchy that no amount of public media image building could override the fundamental legal boundaries of the crown. Armed with her unshakable belief in constitutional duty, she set the stage for the formal execution of legal authority, preparing to dismantle the invalid title once and for all. The execution of authority. When the moment arrived to dismantle Queen Camilla's shadow network, there was no loud confrontation, no public briefing, and no dramatic spectacle for the media to feast upon. The British monarchy operates with a quiet, lethal efficiency that has been refined over centuries of institutional survival. Once an unratified mandate or an improper legal framework is identified, the corrective machinery turns with complete indifference to personal feelings or private ambitions. Princess Anne did not engage in emotional debates or private pleadings with her brother. Armed with the unequivocal documentation provided by Andrew Parker Bowles and backed by the foundational rules of constitutional law, she executed an administrative strike of total precision. The strategy was designed to achieve total neutralization before Queen Camilla's private advisors even realized their operational framework was under direct attack. The execution phase began on a quiet Tuesday morning at St. James Palace. Princess Anne convened an emergency meeting of the Senior Executive Board overseeing royal estate management, sovereign grant allocations, and official patronages. Present in the room were the Chief Legal Counsel to the Crown, the senior trustees of the royal archives, and the private secretaries representing the primary royal households. Without preamble, the Princess Royal placed the archive dossier on the conference table. She systematically outlined every legal irregularity, every unratified clause, and every unauthorized property or trust agreement that had been quietly constructed over the past decade. Her presentation was cold, factual, and backed by undeniable precedent. She did not frame the issue as a personal dispute between family members. She framed it precisely as what it was: an unconstitutional administrative breach that threatened the legal integrity of the sovereign grant and the future authority of the Prince of Wales. The directive issued by Princess Anne was absolute and non-negotiable. First, all administrative files, legal drafts, and operational budgets associated with Queen Camilla, secondary title project, were placed under immediate statutory freeze. External legal firms that had facilitated the off-the-record codicils were relieved of their duties to the royal estate, their access to private archives revoked without prior notice. Second, Princess Anne ordered a comprehensive line-by-line audit of every honorary military title, charity presidency, and trust board seat associated with Camilla's private office. Any position that had been quietly reassigned based on the unratified mandate was immediately ordered to be returned to central oversight, or vacated entirely. Third, the financial conduits meant to guarantee the shadow court long-term independence were completely shut down. The Duchy of Cornwall estate managers, acting in full alignment with Prince William and Princess Anne instructions, invalidated all draft lease agreements and property set-asides intended for Camilla Extended Circle. The speed of the operation left the Camilla administrative team entirely disoriented. Within 48 hours, the structural foundation of their parallel court had ceased to exist. When Queen Camilla key strategists attempted to lodge formal complaints, they discovered that the legal pathways had been completely rewired. All administrative appeals regarding household governance, estate charters, and ceremonial appointments were now required to pass through a newly reinforced executive review board chaired directly by senior constitutional experts loyal to the bloodline hierarchy. The physical reality of the purge became undeniable inside the palace walls. Office spaces within St. James Palace that had been quietly set aside for Camilla, expanded private staff were reclaimed under the official banner of household optimization. External public relations consultants who had been secretly retained to build the narrative around the secondary title were informed that their service contracts were terminated with immediate effect. For Queen Camilla, the realization of what had transpired was a staggering blow. The unratified title, designed to secure her permanent power base and protect her influence into the future, had been completely erased from the operational apparatus of the monarchy. There were no public statements issued, no scandalous press leaks allowed, and no constitutional debates opened in Parliament. To the outside world, the royal routine continued without missing a single beat. Inside the institution, however, the message was unmistakably clear. Princess Anne had executed the supreme authority of the crown, proving that no spouse, courtier, or shadow advisor could override the unyielding laws of royal governance. The invalid title was gone, the parallel court was dismantled, and the unshakable supremacy of the sovereign bloodline remained completely absolute. The reassignment of power. The true strength of an institution lies not in its ability to destroy an unauthorized structure, but in its ability to immediately replace it with an ironclad, orderly framework. Once Princess Anne had executed the administrative strike, and Prince William had locked down the financial conduits, the palace did not simply leave a vacuum. Instead, the working royals launched a comprehensive reassignment of power that permanently redistributed authority back to the direct line of succession. The hidden title that Queen Camilla's court had sought to build was never just about a label or an honorary title on a letterhead. It was designed to come with real operational muscle, high-profile military appointments, direct oversight of historic royal trusts, and permanent seats on international charitable foundations. These positions were meant to provide her private court with lasting institutional leverage. With the invalid nature of that shadow mandate fully exposed, every single office, military patronage, and trust board seat attached to it was immediately called back for administrative review. Princess Anne took the lead in the structural redistribution, utilizing her formal authority as gold stick in waiting and one of the most senior working military patronages in the nation. She personally oversaw the reallocation of the regimental appointments. Honorary colonel size and historic military associations that had been quietly drafted for Camilla's secondary office were systematically reassigned to proven, dedicated working royals. Senior military leaders, long accustomed to strict adherence to chain of command and constitutional protocol, welcomed the move with quiet relief. The armed forces require absolute clarity in their honorary ranks, and the resolution of the unratified title restored total integrity to the regimental hierarchy. Simultaneously, Prince William and Princess Catherine expanded their executive oversight across the central trusts. The high-profile charitable initiatives and estate patronages that had been caught in the Shadow Court's orbit were formally brought under the direct governance of the Royal Foundation of the Prince and Princess of Wales. By centralizing these major national initiatives, William and Catherine ensured that every single pound of funding, every public appearance, and every strategic partnership directly reinforced the legitimate future of the crown. For Queen Camilla's remaining private staff, the reassignment was absolute. The off-the-record advisors who had managed the independent strategy were quietly reassigned to basic, non-administrative duties or given formal severance packages. The private offices that had been set up inside St. James's Palace were entirely cleared out, converted back into central operational hubs for the working royal corps. Inside the palace, the daily routine of the state went on without a single public interruption. The public saw Queen Camilla standing beside King Charles at official ceremonies, beautifully dressed and performing her duties as queen consort with polished professionalism. The cameras continued to frame the monarchy as a unified, seamless unit. Yet, Behind those majestic historic gates, the reassignment of power was complete and irreversible. Queen Camilla retained her public crown, her formal consort status, and her traditional ceremonial role. But the underlying engine of state power, the legal mechanics of the estate, the financial muscle of the trusts, and the permanent military patronages were now firmly held in the hands of Princess Anne and the Prince of Wales. The Shadow Court had been completely neutralized, its hidden secret dragged into the light, and its unauthorized power permanently reassigned to those who command the unyielding future of the sovereign bloodline. What this moment reveals about the new royal order, the true test of any institutional action, lies not in the immediate drama of its execution, but in the lasting reality that takes its place. Once the unratified mandate was voided, the secondary legal files sealed, and the financial conduits redirected back to central oversight, the modern British monarchy entered a restructured era. The immediate result inside the royal enterprise was an atmosphere of total, absolute order. Queen Camilla remained queen consort in the eyes of the public, carrying out her public duties alongside King Charles with steady professionalism. The cameras continued to frame every official event. The public processions proceeded along the traditional routes, and global media outlets covered state visits with standard diplomatic praise. Yet, within the working administrative corridors of the royal estate, the power dynamics had been permanently recalibrated. Camilla's position was redefined into a ceremonial role in the purest sense of the concept, visible, respected, and completely detached from the core legal machinery of the state. The private advisors who had managed her independent profile were no longer under contract. The draft agreements designed to secure private wealth and long-term operational influence for her personal circle had been reduced to voided files in legal offices across London. For the courtiers, legal teams, and administrative directors who remained, the lesson was clear and unmistakable. The era of internal factional briefing, shadow courts, and unratified titles was over. Power within the House of Windsor had been consolidated into a unified executive partnership, controlled directly by the sovereign bloodline. Princess Anne and Prince William had not merely neutralized a single invalid title, they had set a definitive precedent for how the British monarchy would govern itself throughout the 21st century. This swift realignment served as the structural blueprint for the upcoming era. For decades, royal experts speculated on how Prince William would approach his eventual ascension to the throne. Many assumed his modern public image meant he would favor a flexible, informal approach to head of state responsibilities, allowing personal agendas and independent courts to flourish alongside his own administration. The systematic neutralization of the shadow title completely demolished that assumption. Through these decisive actions, the royal family revealed the true nature of its modern leadership. Beneath the charity engagements, the focus on environmental initiatives, and the warm public interactions lies an institutional philosophy rooted in absolute realism. The leaders of the crown understand that the modern world presents unprecedented challenges to traditional institutions. In an era of intense financial scrutiny, rapid digital information flows, and declining institutional trust, a constitutional monarchy cannot afford internal divisions, unauthorized secondary courts, or hidden legal arrangements. To endure for generations to come, the crown must operate with total transparency, strict legal compliance, and absolute single-mindedness. Every asset, every financial decision, and every official title must directly reinforce the sovereign legitimacy of the monarch and the line of succession. By exposing the hidden secret and dismantling the unratified title before ascending the throne, Prince William, with the crucial backing of Princess Anne, ensured that his future reign will begin with a completely clean administrative slate. He cleared the board entirely, guaranteeing that when his coronation arrives, the institution will be free of internal debt, secondary factions, or competing power centers. The relationship between the Prince of Wales and the Princess Royal also cemented during this period. Together, they established a unified shield around the core working royals. There are no divergent media strategies, no competing estate priorities, and no off-the-record legal maneuverings. They operate as a singular, disciplined center of power, prioritizing the long-term stability of the crown above all personal considerations. The court officials who witnessed the transition came to view the operation not as a sudden family dispute, but as a masterclass in modern institutional preservation. They had eliminated a hidden network, stripped away an unauthorized title, and re-established total control over the estate, all without creating a single public constitutional crisis or dropping a tear in the public eye. In the quiet aftermath, every operational branch of the palace hierarchy aligned with this central mandate. Department heads who had once navigated competing directions from separate private offices were brought into a single chain of command. The management of sovereign estates, historic trusts, and military patronages was streamlined, eliminating redundant positions and removing any residual influence from external political consultants. This total administrative clarity ensured that every official move was subjected to rigorous constitutional oversight. Financial reserves were audited to reflect absolute compliance with modern public standards, guaranteeing that private interests could never again compromise institutional integrity. The structural reforms demonstrated that the monarchy had transformed into a lean, highly organized state apparatus capable of weathering any future political storm. Furthermore, this internal purge sent a profound message to external legal and financial advisors who had historically catered to individual royal factions. The clear boundary established by Princess Anne made it evident that independent arrangements negotiated without explicit sovereign backing were inherently worthless. Law firms, estate trustees, and financial managers quickly recognized that the future of the institution belonged entirely to the direct line of succession, effectively shutting down any lingering avenues for off-the-record deal-making. As the physical footprint of the private court was dismantled, the palace legal team set about codifying these structural changes to prevent any future attempt at administrative drift. Every charter governing peripheral royal foundations was thoroughly re-examined. New protocols were implemented requiring double authentication for any proposal touching upon sovereign titles or long-term trust appointments. Independent review boards that had previously operated under gray, informal mandates were brought firmly under the oversight of the Lord Chamberlain's office and the Treasury Solicitor. This systematic codification meant that the outcome of Princess Anne's intervention was not merely an isolated operational victory, but a permanent structural hardening of the palace constitution. Courtiers who had once maneuvered in the background to build quiet power bases found their avenues of influence permanently sealed. By establishing absolute institutional transparency across all departments, the Princess Royal guaranteed that future generations of working royals would operate within a system completely free from parallel governance or hidden administrative agendas. The cultural shift within the palace walls was immediate and profound. Where there had once been quiet friction between competing private offices, an atmosphere of singular purpose took hold. Staff members were remade into custodians of a unified mission, held to rigorous operational standards that prioritized institutional security over personal diplomacy. The realignment restored total confidence to the senior administrative ranks, proving that the royal enterprise possessed both the wisdom to identify hidden vulnerabilities and the strength to eliminate them completely. When the global public looks at the British royal family, they see an ancient tradition preserved in time. They see historic cathedrals, state carriages, velvet robes, and family members standing together on the balcony of Buckingham Palace. It is an image carefully maintained to project stability, unity, and unbroken historical continuity. However, behind that polished facade lies an unyielding truth that has governed the British crown for over 1,000 years. The crown is not a family business, nor is it a cooperative venture meant to accommodate the private ambitions or long-term independence of those who marry into its ranks. It is an instrument of state authority, operating on cold, structural principles that demand total submission to constitutional law and the sovereign line of succession. The story of how Princess Anne stripped Queen Camilla of her final hidden title is not a story of personal spite, emotional drama, or old family rivalries. To view it through that sensational lens is to completely misunderstand how power operates at the highest level of the state. The intervention led by Princess Anne and supported by Prince William was an act of pure, calculated institutional self-defense. When presented with the secret evidence uncovered by Andrew Parker Bowles, they did not hesitate, negotiate, or seek a quiet political compromise. They acted with immediate lawful finality to preserve the undivided authority of the throne. In doing so, they delivered a profound lesson to anyone who believed the modern monarchy had become soft or susceptible to shadow influence. They proved that when the future of the crown is at stake, the internal mechanisms of the House of Windsor will turn with the same unyielding precision that has sustained the institution through centuries of turbulent history. Queen Camilla retains her official standing, her consort crown, and her ceremonial place beside King Charles. She will continue to represent the nation at state functions and be received with high honors around the world. Yet, stripped of the unratified title, cut off from independent financial reserves, and permanently separated from secondary legal influence, her position stands as an eternal reminder of a foundational law of statecraft. Public honors are granted by the state, but true power belongs exclusively to those who safeguard the future of the sovereign bloodline. As the House of Windsor steps into an uncompromising new era, the Princess Royal and the Prince of Wales have made their message clear to the world. The throne will not be shared with shadow networks or unratified courts. The path forward belongs to an unassailable, disciplined institution, governed by duty, protected by law, and anchored in the absolute continuity of the crown. This eternal law of sovereign power ensures that personal desires will always remain subordinate to the overarching mission of the monarchy. History has repeatedly shown that institutions survive only when their guardians are willing to enforce strict rules without exception. By taking a stand against secondary legal structures, Princess Anne and Prince William reaffirmed the core principle that has preserved the British throne through centuries of political revolution, war, and social upheaval. To understand the full significance of this moment is to recognize that sovereign power is defined as much by what it denies as by what it grants. The royal institution has endured precisely because it possesses an instinct for self-preservation that overrides individual convenience, historical sentiment, or personal relationships. When the stability of the direct line is brought into question, the machinery of state acts with cold, mathematical precision to eliminate ambiguity and reinforce the supreme authority of the monarch. The structural clarity forged during this quiet crisis will serve as the bedrock for the monarchy for decades to come. As Prince William prepares to assume the ultimate responsibilities of the throne, he does so backed by an administrative framework that has been purged of weakness, shadow influence, and historical compromises. The authority of the Prince of Wales stands supreme, secured by the unyielding resolve of Princess Anne and anchored in the fundamental principles of constitutional law. The resolution of the hidden secret and the permanent removal of the unratified title signify the dawn of a streamlined, highly disciplined royal household. The shadow courts have been closed, the hidden legal networks completely dismantled, and the core authority of the direct bloodline restored to its rightful place. The legacy of this decisive intervention will echo through the halls of St. James Palace and Windsor Castle for generations, standing as a monument to institutional strength, unwavering discipline, and the absolute supremacy of sovereign duty. As the nation looks toward the next chapter of its royal history, the absolute authority of the sovereign line stands completely restored. The legacy of this decisive intervention will reverberate through future reigns, offering a blueprint for strength, discipline, and uncompromising duty. The modern British crown moves forward into the future as an ironclad institution, completely unified, legally untouched, and unshakable in its commitment to sovereign supremacy. Did Andrew do the right thing by finally breaking his silence, or has he set in motion consequences that will damage the family beyond repair? The royal order has changed forever.